So I think by now you all pretty much know what of a sucker I am for cinematic sounds and how much I use them in my intros and in my music, and therefore I'm pretty stoked today to show you guys a plugin by UVI called Meteor FX. So my name is ARTFX, let's get to it. So here we are in Meteor FX, and Meteor FX is a plugin created to create cinematic style sounds, and it does it by giving you the option to use up to 7 different layers to create a cinematic style impact and rise. Now, the beauty of this is that you get a lot of control. The main tab is what you're looking at right now, and the main tab has very little controls. It's actually very simple, and a lot of the controls are actually much deeper under the hood of this plugin, so we're gonna get into that in this video. I'm gonna give you a full rundown of how this thing works. I'm gonna showcase as much as I can of it, and yeah, without further ado, let's just get into it. So let's talk about this main interface first. The main interface, at the top left, that's where you would load up your presets. So this is where you can have, where you can see your preset browser. So the preset browser, let's start there. As you can see, these are the categories. We've got a lot of different categories. Meteor highlights, that is just a category with just presets that they've selected that they think are pretty good. Other presets, for instance, slams, booms, cinematic, orchestral, downers, destruction, synth, percussions, rises, stutters and pulses, whooshes, combat instruments, trap, bass, ambiances, dark, and effects. So that's a lot of different categories, and if I hover over all of these, you can see these are the presets. Now, some of these have a lot of different presets. For instance, the slams folder, you can see that this goes down to the letter I, and you can see that there's a lot more. So there's actually so many different presets that come with this. And in these different categories, there's just a lot of presets. So at that side of the plugin, this one is pretty loaded with stuff. Above the preset browser, you've got your load and save icon. So you can also make your own presets, and you can save and load them to your hard drive. It'll actually save them as an XML file, which will not appear in the preset browser of the plugin, as far as I know. If that do happens, then please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it doesn't. So it'll just save them somewhere on your hard drive where you like to save your presets, and then when you want to load one of your custom presets, you need to use the load icon. I think that is what they mean when I read the manual, so I think the load icon needs to be used to load your custom presets. That is the preset browser. Below the preset browser is just some general controls for the individual layers and for the rise and the impact. So as I said, every sound that you make in the library will be consisting of a rise section and then an impact section. So the rise section comes before the impact section, and the two together can create really nice cinematic style sounds, like you heard in the previews of the presets that I showed you at the start of this video. So you've got two big knobs, the rise and the impact knob. These are to turn the rise on and to turn the impact on or off, of course. Then below that you've got your different controls for the individual layers. So you can see we have 3 layers for the rise section, and then we have 4 layers for the impact section. So that is how the layers are distributed across the different sections. So below the volume sliders, you can see we have a bypass button, so we can actually turn a layer on or off if we want, or if we don't like it. And there's also the solo buttons, which help us to audition one layer at a time, for instance, to really get into it and hear what every single layer is doing. Then, in the middle, we have a control. This is 2 controls actually. We've got the volume control at the top. So this here controls the volume of the patch. Very simple. So if we bring it down, it'll be very quiet. If we bring it up, it'll be very loud. Simple as that. Below that, we've got a special effect. The thrust effect is a multiband compressor, and it's also an enhancer. So if I play this preset, that is without any of the thrust effect applied to it. And now if I bring the thrust effect up, let's say about halfway, so about here, you can hear we get more high frequencies, and it's enhancing the sound and making it louder. And now if I bring it up all the way, we get that. So that is what the thrust effect does. I think it's a very powerful effect, and it can really help to make stuff sound really beefy and strong. Next to that, on the right side, on the bottom right side, we've got the length of the riser. So this is where you would set the length of the rise section. So this particular one has a really short rise section. If I play a note, it's just a very short rise before the actual hit happens. I can make that much longer if I want. So for instance, if I do about 2.5 seconds, you can hear it now becomes a lot longer, and therefore you can have a lot more control over what you want to do with it. If you want to sync it to the BPM, for instance, sync it to the host tempo of your DAW, you can click on this beat section. Right now I have a 4-beat riser. And this riser will be perfectly in time with any music that I'm making in my project. Really, really great. So below that, you've got some more controls. This is the impact offset, so this will offset the impact section from the rise section. So normally, the impact section will happen at exactly the moment when the rise ends. Sometimes you want to have the impact section a little bit earlier, before the rise ends. Sometimes that can be cool. So if you drag it to the left, you can see we get a negative offset, which means the rise is going to be shifted to the left, so it's going to happen a little bit sooner than when it's set to 0 milliseconds here. Or we can also drag it to the right, which is actually going to create a little gap between the rise section and the hit section. So for instance, if I now do this, you can hear that there's that little gap in between, which could be a really nice effect to use as well. So then we've got this crossfade section. That is pretty interesting. By default, you have no crossfade between the rise and the impact, and that is, it would look like that. So it looks like that T shape. So if I click it, you now get this blue line that is diagonal, which means the blue is the rise section and the green is the impact section, as you can see right here. So the blue line going down now means that the rise section gets a slight fade out at the end of it. And if I click it again, we now get a cross section pretty much with 2 diagonal lines, which now means that the impact section is going to get a slight fade in at the start of it. So that's how you can, if you use this offset, you can use those crossfades to make them fade into each other a little bit more nicely and make sure that they don't stop or start really abruptly. Sometimes you might want to use that. It's really nice that they included that. I have to note though that this crossfade only works if you're using the offset of the impact. So if the offset here is set to 0 milliseconds, the crossfade here will not do anything. That will not do any effect. So just a little thing to note. So one last thing I wanted to say is right here the length of the riser is currently set to 1 second. If I switch to the next preset, it switches to 0.3 seconds. That is understandable because the length is saved within the preset, of course. But let's say I am working on this particular preset, and I really like the length of it. So for instance, I'm setting it to a length of exactly 2 beats, and I really know for sure that I want this particular riser to be 2 beats long in my track, but I just haven't found a good sounding riser yet. I can lock the length of that rise by clicking that little lock icon, and now I can go into the preset browser and I can, for instance, switch to the next preset, which I know has a length of 0.3 seconds. If I click it, this preset now has 2 beats of a length. So that lock icon really helps, because now you can just freely browse through any of these presets and the rise time will not change. So we get a 2-second rise time, whichever preset we select. Very cool. So that's it for the main page, and now I think it's time to actually dive under the hood of this plugin. I'm going to select the initialize preset so that we have basically a blank slate to work from. Let's dive under the hood. At the top right, you've got a settings knob, and if you click that, it opens up the actual interface where you can design your sounds. This is what it looks like. Here you've got your interface, so you've got 3 layers right here, which is the rise section. So this is your rise section. And then here you've got the impact section. So the impact section is 4 layers and the rise is 3 layers. At the top you've got some basic controls. So you've got 3 different windows. We're currently in the edit window, then we've got a modulator window, and then we've got an effects window, which the other 2 windows I'm going to talk about in this video as well. Then you've got the same volume control and that thrust control that we had on the main page. So these are actually the same controls, so if you change it right here, it'll also change it on the main page. And then you've got a couple of other stuff here. So you've got the velocity setting. Velocity setting, this turns on the velocity sensitivity. So if I click this, it turns off, and now the patch will not be velocity sensitive. Sometimes I actually would like to do that, but most of the times I like them to be velocity sensitive. So I click that, and then below it you've got a percentage that you can use to set how much it actually responds to the incoming velocity of the keys you play. Then you've got a release time, and you've got this hold knob. So, but most of the time you would like to have the hold knob turned on, for most of the rise patches at least. But sometimes you might not want to do that, and that is when you want to create a playable instrument. When you want to create a playable instrument, you can turn this off, and then below that you've got the release time, so you can actually specify how long the sound is going to keep on playing until you leave, or until you let go of the note. So let's get into the 2 sections. So we've got the rise section and we've got the impact section. Let's start with the impact section. You've got these boxes right here with a plus icon. Those are the boxes where you can load up a source sound. So if I click the first one, we get a bunch of different categories. So these are the categories for the impact sounds. You have different categories for the rise section. Let's see what they are. So on the right section you've got noise, orchestral brass, orchestral miscellaneous, orchestral strings. You've got pads, reverse effects, reverse percussion, rolls, synths, and textures. So that's for the rise section. And then on the impact section you've got field recordings metal, field recordings miscellaneous, effects, guitars, machine drums, orchestral brass, orchestral miscellaneous, orchestral percussion, and orchestral strings. Then you've got sub, synths, you've got tails, world drums, and world metal. So that's a whole bunch of different categories, and inside of these categories you've got a lot of different sounds to choose from. So let's start with the impact sound, and let's load something up here. So yeah, there's a lot of things to choose from. Let's say I want to start with an orchestral percussion sound. I think that would be a good thing to start with. There's a lot to choose from. Let's start with one of these big hits. So big hit 1, let's see what that sounds like. So now we've got big hit 1 loaded up in this layer, and you can see that these other things turn on. This one now sounds like this. Okay, so it's a little bit of a percussion hit, kind of like. I'm going to boost the thrust knob here, so that we get a little bit more volume. Maybe 1 lower. And let's browse through these and see what these other ones sound like. I think I like this one. So below that we've got a bunch of controls now. These ones are to basically just browse through the presets. This is to turn the layer on and off. Your volume slider right here. So let's say I want to make this one a little bit louder. Now it's a bit louder. You've got a panning knob, so you can pan the layer left and right. A mute and a solo switch to mute or solo the layer. And then you've got a reverb and a delay send. So these will send a copy of the layer to a reverb or to a delay and then mix it back in with the original dry signal. And if I just bring this up, we now get some more reverb on the sound, and the same will happen with the delay, of course. So I'll add a little bit of reverb to that one, and now let's load up a second layer. So I can, for instance, layer this up with maybe a machine drum, which is going to be like a more digital sounding style drum sound. So for instance, let's choose one of these bass drums. So I'm going to solo the layer. And let's find one that I like. I like this one. So I'm going to make it a bit louder as well. And now let's turn the other layer back on. Yeah, that sounds quite nice. I'm going to lower the other layer a little bit because I made the kick quite loud. That's quite cool. So let's load another layer. I can maybe I'll boost the volume here a little bit because I think it's a little bit quiet right now for you guys. That's what we have right now. Let's go for a third layer. So in this third layer, what should we load up? I feel like maybe something metallic could be cool. So we've got the world metal. So these are some more metallic sounding world instruments. So you've got a whole bunch of different gong sounds and cymbal sounds. You've also got a metal field recording section here. So we've got some stuff like sword hits, sheet hits. Maybe something of these could be cool. Let's try one of these sword hits. Why not? Let's do sword 2. So let's listen to that layer in solo. Okay, that's a really interesting sound. That's a really cool thing to layer in our impact. So let's add a bit of reverb to that. Yeah, I really like what that does. And maybe a bit of delay as well. So the delay currently does that particular effect, but we can actually change the delay itself, and we will do that at some point. But for now, for the time being, I'm just gonna leave it the way it is. So I feel like maybe a tonal instrument could be something that I want to add here. So we've got the orchestral brass and the orchestral strings. Those are definitely tonal layers. We've also got the synth, so those are also tonal layers. Let's see, what are we gonna go for? Like I could add, for instance, a trailer piano. A trailer piano, this is the beauty of these layers, they're all key tracked as well, so I can play whatever key I want on the keyboard, and it will simply play the right key. So if I play an F note, I'm gonna hear an F note, and if I play a C note, I'm gonna hear a C note, and it's mapped across the entire keyboard, so I can also play something really high or really low and it will still work. That's the beauty of this. So you could also make playable instruments. Now, for instance, let's add a little bit of reverb to that piano. That's what it is going to add to our impact sound. So let's listen. I'm not a big fan of it with the sword sound, so maybe we'll find a different orchestral sound here. Maybe one of these brasses could be nice. Big long brass. Let's do that. That one is quite long, yeah. Okay. Let's do that, and I'm gonna bring this one down. I'll bring the sword down a bit because it's quite loud. So that's our impact sound right now. Now we can go to the rise section. So in the rise section, I can choose from different layers. So let's start with the first thing. Let's do a reverse effect. So maybe some reverse organic. What's that gonna sound like? Let's see. So that is what it's going to add. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb to the reverse. And let's offset the impact so that the impact begins a little bit earlier, because I think that'll be a nice effect for this particular one. Yeah. So let's find another layer here. Let's go with a synth layer. Synth overdrive. Let's try that one. Let's see what that sounds like in solo. Okay. Let's listen to that with the other sound as well. Yeah, sounds interesting. I'm still not a big fan of the last brass layer here, so let's see if we can find something bigger. Bigger horns, that sounds maybe like what we need. That's a bit better. I'm gonna make that layer a bit louder. Yeah, that's starting to sound more like it. So let's make the volume of this one a bit quieter. So, right now you can see that the two are locked, right? So we locked the two by linking them. I don't want that, so let's unlink them so I can make this one a bit quieter. In fact, let's make it even quieter. And let's find a final layer here. I'm gonna choose maybe one of these textures. Could be cool. Iron Man reversed, why not? So in solo, that's quite an interesting sound. Let's make it a bit quieter as well. So that's what we have right now. Now, we've just selected the sounds that we want. There's still a couple of controls that I haven't talked about. You've got these pitch controls, so you can actually shift the entire rise an octave down. Or you could shift it an octave up. Sometimes that can give a really nice effect. In fact, I think I like that on this one. So if I shift this an octave up, yeah, I really like that. You can do the same on the impact section, so if you want to do that, you can do that as well. And then you've got these randomize buttons. So you've got a randomize button for the rise, and you've got a randomize button for the impact. If you click that, it randomizes the samples that are loaded up here, and you get a completely different sound. And you can do that here as well. Now you might be thinking, Art, have you not just completely destroyed what you already set up? No, because we've got an undo knob. So if you click this, it'll undo what I've just done, and we are back to what we had. This undo button will save up to 10 different randomized steps that you've done. So don't do 11 because you will not be able to go back to the first one. It saves the last 10 times that you've clicked the randomize button, so keep that in mind. Below every one of these layers, there's another icon, another button, and if you do that, you get some controls to specific to that layer. So this layer, it is being controlled by this volume curve. So the volume curve here controls how quick the sound is going to come in. I could make it really short, or I could make it much longer. Or basically, I don't make it longer or shorter, but I'm controlling the curve of the volume. So you can set that right here. So you can either set it to the mod wheel, to the curve, which is this, or you can just turn it off, which means it's not going to have a volume curve. It's just going to play back the sample the way it is. I like to use the curve and just create a curve right here. And then we've got a distortion module. So that distortion module is applied to just this layer. So I could apply a little bit of analog distortion if I want, or I could apply a bit of digital distortion, which sounds really, really interesting, by the way. It creates a really cool effect. And we can also control that with either the mod wheel or the curve. So I could say I set this to a particular amount that I like, and then I want that to come in gradually so that the start of the rise is not distorted, but the end will be. I could set this curve to the distortion here, and it will follow along with whatever curve I create here. Really nice. Then we've got a filter that is just a high pass or a low pass filter, and again you can set it to the curve or the mod wheel so you can control this over time. So let's say for instance you want the rise to start low pass and end completely open with all the frequencies, you could do that. Then you've got another section which is for the pitch, and this one is pretty interesting because here you can actually control the pitch curve. So that's really cool. For instance, maybe we have these horns right here. So we've got these horns, and as you can see, we got the pitch value here as well. Let's say I want the horns, if I solo these. Let's say I want these horns to go down in pitch. I could do that. So I could say, let's make it go down one semitone, so really not that much at all. And I'm gonna make it go down over 2 seconds, maybe? Now it'll go down in pitch, and that'll create a really nice effect in the full patch. That is it for all of the things here. You could also set the pitch to be connected to the curve if you want. So for instance for this rise, if I want that rise to maybe, I don't know, maybe pitch up. It's a little bit hard to hear, but you could have that rise pitch up and follow along with the curve that you created here. So on the impact, you've got quite similar controls, but slightly different. So on the impact, you've got an offset control for each different of these layers, so you can also offset the layers independent from each other. You cannot only use the offset here, which offsets the entire impact, but you can also offset one impact layer at a time, which is pretty damn helpful, because then that way you can, for instance, say, I want to have this impact sound, and then I have this impact sound, and I want the second one to come in a little bit later than the first one, so that the first kick drum is a little bit clearer. I could do that. Go to the first one and create an offset of, let's say, maybe 25 milliseconds. And now, if I play these two together, which I cannot do, but I can mute the other two. And let's mute these as well. Let's make the offset a little bit bigger. I'm going to make the offset about 60 milliseconds. See, so now we have an offset between them. I'm going to make it a bit smaller. And now we get that. I might want to offset the other layers as well. So let's do this as well. And let's offset this last one. And let's turn these on. So now we get that first initial kick drum, and then all the other layers come in afterwards. And with the rise together, everything sounds like this. It makes up for a really nice and big sounding sound effect. You've got a couple of more controls. So you've got the offset first. After the offset, we've got a transient shaper. So the first knob, it controls the attack, so the transient of the sound, and the second knob controls the sustain or the tail. So the first knob, if we drag it to the left, we get less attack, and if we drag it to the right, we get more attack. So on this layer, it's not really going to be doing that much, but if we go to the... Let's go to the percussion sound here, and let's solo that. That's the percussion layer. If I want to have more attack, I'll bring that knob up. And we get a stronger attack, a stronger transient. And if I bring it down, we get a much quieter transient. I like to maybe add a little bit more attack to this one. We also have the sustain or the tail. So if we bring it down, we get a much shorter sound. And if we bring it up, it's obviously going to make it longer. Then we've got some more distortion, so we've got analog and digital distortion. Maybe I want to add a little bit of the analog distortion here. Quite nice sounding distortion, I have to say. Yeah, I like that. Makes it really nice and strong. And then we've got a filter, so let's say maybe I want to take out a little bit of the high frequencies. I can bring this down, and then it is a low pass filter. If I bring it up, it's going to be a high pass filter. So that way you can also filter the different layers independent from each other to make sure that they don't clash. So if you have two low frequency layers, for instance, you can high pass one of them, and that way they won't clash, and still you can use both layers at the same time. You could do that, low passing it a bit. Or you could use this tilt EQ, which is basically, well, it is a tilt EQ. So if we bring it to the left, it's going to make the low frequencies louder and the high frequencies quieter. If you bring it to the right, it's going to do the opposite. So I'm going to bring this slightly to the lower side, so that we get a bit more bass in this percussion hit. So now if I turn the layers back on, that's starting to sound pretty cool. So we've got the pitch control, I already talked about that. This is pretty similar as the other one. Here you've got a time knob as well that you can use to basically control how long it takes for the pitch to get to that particular value, like I've showed you here on the bigger horns. And then finally you've got the granular section. So let's go to that sword and let's turn it on. Let's mute the other ones. And this is the sword sound. And let's turn the granular section on. So you can hear what that does, right? So bringing this to the left is going to increase the size of the grains of the granular section, but it's also going to increase the gap in between the grains. So that is pretty cool, but if you bring it up, then it does the opposite. It's going to create smaller grains, but it's also going to decrease the gap in between the grains, so you get a more smoother sound. It is going to sound a bit more robotic, but that's just the nature of a granular type sound. I don't think there's an actual way to stretch the sound. It just granulizes it, which is still kind of a cool effect. You can use it to create interesting stuff. And maybe if we combine that with the pitch here, so let's say I'm going to make the pitch go down over about a second or something. Let's make it go down over an octave. And let's set it to about here maybe, let's see. Yeah, why not? Let's listen to that with the other layers. So that's it for the entire edit page here, so we can go into the next page, which is the mod page. On the mod page, you've got three big effects that you can use. We've got the LFO volume, we've got the motion filter, and the motion pen. So let's talk about the LFO volume first. This is a LFO attached to the volume. How surprising. No, we've got three waveforms that we can choose from. We've got a sine wave LFO, a square wave LFO, and a triangle wave LFO. And on the right side, you can select if you want to send it to the rise, or to the impact, or to both at the same time. I probably want to send it to the rise. I'm going to make the rise a little bit longer. So let's set that to a length of 4 beats. Or let's do 2 beats, that's maybe a bit better for sake of demonstration. 2 beats, and if I now play this, so this is with a speed on the LFO of 1/16th note, let's play this and see what it sounds like. So you can hear that we get this really cool effect. It's actually 1/8 notes, but that's because I've set the tempo here in Falcon to 86 instead of my project tempo, which is 172. I could actually turn it to 1/16. So that's what we get. It's a really cool effect, by the way, and I really like it. I might want to offset the two layers a bit more, so let's offset this a bit more. Yeah, that's sounding really nice. Maybe a bit less than that because it was quite extreme. Yeah, really cool. So that LFO is connected to the volume, and it's an effect that you hear a lot in film music sound effects. You have the frequency, which is the speed of the LFO, and then you've got the depth. So let's say this was really aggressive. Let's say I want to have it a little bit less than that. You still get a little bit of the LFO movement, but it's not as pronounced as before. Pretty interesting though, but I like to have that quite aggressive, to be honest. Next to that, we've got two shift knobs. So these knobs will offset or shift the position of this knob. You might be thinking, why would you want to do that? Well, you have these two shift knobs, and these are connected to the shift time as well. So the shift time is very interesting, because if we, for instance, set this to 2, that means that now the shift time is 2 beats. If I now use, for instance, the shift here, so let's say I want to shift this up. And the shift time is 2 beats. Our rise time was also 2 beats. So let's see what happens now. Okay, let's bring the depth all the way up. So I can make it even more pronounced by making that rise time longer. So let's do 4 beats, or let's do 8 even. That's gonna make it really pronounced. So what is gonna happen now? I'm gonna set the shift time to 8 beats as well. The time it's going to take for the depth to reach 100% is going to be 8 beats. And because the rise time is 8 beats, the start of a riser, because I've set the shift all the way up, the start of the riser is going to have nothing of the LFO effect, and then the end of the riser is going to have the full effect of the LFO. Listen. So you can make that LFO effect come in, which is really powerful. And you can do the same with the speed of it. So if you, for instance, want to speed the LFO movement up, you can do that as well. And by the way, this currently the shift time is locked to the BPM. But if we go in here and if we set the length of the riser to be not based on a BPM, but based on the time that we set, so 2.8 seconds here, this will now also be specified in seconds. So below that, we've got the motion filter. The motion filter is kind of the same thing. It's a multi-step filter. So you have a low-pass filter, and it's controlled by this shaper, or by this shape here. This is basically just a step sequencer that you can use to create different steps, and it'll control this cutoff. So I can set the cutoff to be a particular value, like for instance that, and then this will control that. Really simple, actually. Let's connect it to the rise, and let's load up a triangle shape, and let's make it quite quick. Let's see what happens. So there you have it. It's just like an LFO, and you can also create like a really weird shape if you want. Like we could do something like this, and it's literally just going to jump back and forth. And if I sync it to the BPM, so let's go back here, let's sync it to the BPM. This smooth knob right here will basically smoothen out the transition between the steps. So if you create a particular shape and you don't like that it jumps from one step to the next one, you can bring up the smooth, and that is the time that it will take to transition between the two, creating smooth transitions between the steps, which is pretty cool, really helpful. Then we've got the motion pen. The motion pen is the same thing, but now it's not connected to the filter, but it's connected to the stereo width of the sound. We could maybe make it go from the left to the right, or from the right to the left, or from left to center to the left, you know, all kinds of stuff you could do with it. But it works the exact same way as the one above here. So again, you can assign it to the rise or the impact. So that's what we get. Now, I'm gonna turn these off because I don't really like them. I do like the LFO effect on this particular layer, but yeah, that's it for the entire mod section. So now we can go into the final page, which is the effects page, and here we have some final effects. So here you've got the reverb and the delay. So these are your reverb and delay that we had previously as well. I could, for instance, say I want a different reverb shape. So we are currently using the big cathedral, but I could use a different reverb signal, a different reverb impulse response if I want. So let's say I want to have dark church. And let's turn the rise off so that we only hear the impact. So you can use that, maybe make the reverb a bit longer. I could take out some of the low end from the reverb if I want, so that's really cool as well. Maybe add some more highs to the reverb, or increase just the general loudness of the reverb. Then we've got the delay below here, so that is your send delay. That is the one that we used on the sword sound. You've got a high pass for delay, so let's say I want to high pass the delay so that it doesn't interfere with the low end of the other layers. I could low pass it if I want. I could set the speed, so maybe I want to set the speed of the delay to 1/8 note. And let's increase the feedback, and let's increase the level a bit. Now, we also have a width control, and this basically just creates a little bit more stereo width for the reflections of the delay. So the reflections are basically the copies of the original signal that the delay creates, and you can make those wider or more mono with this width knob. So if I want to create a bit more stereo width, I can bring that up. Below that, we've got an EQ. This EQ is basically very simple. It's a low pass filter at the start. So we've got a low pass filter to shave off any low or any high frequencies that we don't need. Then we've got a very basic EQ, but it's a basic EQ, but which works and it just does what it needs to do. You've got a low gain, so you can lower or bring up the gain of the low frequencies. Then you've got a mid gain, doing the same thing but for the mid frequencies, and then you've got a high gain doing the same for the high frequencies. Between those three, you've got two crossover knobs, so these will control the crossover frequency between the low gain and the mid gain, and the mid gain and the high gain respectively. Below that, we've got a width effect, and this effect is a stereo widener pretty much. So we've got a amount knob. This will increase or decrease the amount of stereo widening. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't do it in terms of doing like a chorus effect or something like that. It is actually a true mid-side stereo enhancer. So if we leave this at the center position, it's not going to do anything. If we're going to bring the amount to the left, it's going to decrease the volume of the sides of the signal, and it's going to leave the mid signal in the center signal. It's going to leave that at the original volume. So if we bring this all the way down, we hear nothing of the sides and we get a perfectly mono sound. If I bring this up, it's going to increase the volume of the sides, creating a bigger amount of stereo. So then we've got the delay knob. Now the delay knob basically creates a delay between either the left and the right channel or the other way around. So it delays one of the two. It's kind of like the Haas effect. You got to be careful with this because it can create stereo issues, like issues in the mono, with mono compatibility. But a little bit of it can usually work to make stuff sound a bit more stereo. So if I bring it to the left channel is going to be getting a delay. If I bring it to the right channel is going to be getting a delay. I also have this color, and that color will basically just EQ the stereo effect that we have here. So I could, for instance, make the stereo effect sound a little bit darker by bringing the color down, or I could make it sound a little bit brighter by bringing the color up. And I think that is it for the entire plugin. That's it. So I hope you guys like this one. If you do, then I'm gonna put a link to this plugin, to the product page, in the description below this video. I'm also gonna put a link to UVI Falcon in the description as well. So if you want those, or if you just want to have a look at the libraries, then check them out. I really like this one. I think this one is definitely going to be a great tool for me to use. I think I'm really gonna like this one. I've only played with it just a little bit, and I already really like using it. Yeah. It has a lot of options and a lot of different source materials that you can choose from, so there's quite a bit of different options and different kind of sounds that you can make with it, I think. Now, if you like this video and if you want me to do something next, then please leave a comment below and let me know what you want me to do a video about. Maybe you're struggling with a type of sound, or maybe you're just looking for some info on a particular plugin. Let me know in the comments below and I'll try and do a tutorial about it if I know I can make a good video about that particular subject. Other than that, if you want to be a member of my Discord community, I have an invite link in the description below this video that you can use to join my Discord server, where we have discussions about music production, discussions about different plugins, or where you can just share your music and get some tips or help other people get better at their music. It's just a great place to hang out and come have a chat. So check the invite link out if you want. And I will, of course, be doing another live stream upcoming Friday. So if you have time upcoming Friday, 8 p.m. Central European time, then feel free to join in with the live stream, where I probably will be working on a drum and bass track. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you like it, and I'll see you back soon. Peace.